Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? Ha ha ha. Just kidding. We all have coronavirus. Ha. Yes. Okay. So here we are, back on the radio show in a time of coronavirus. And I guess we're going to start writing novels about this one day. It is Thursday, March 12th, 2020. We are alive and ready for another show, and I believe we will remain alive and ready for other shows. We're, once again, I should remind you, only Kagro in the Morning. Kagro in the Morning, the only podcast in America, except for all of the rest of them, except for the really good professional ones, prepared to go to a show in isolation, prepared to work from home, and bring you the same content, same great content, the same content we've brought you all along, because we've been ready for the apocalypse for a very long time, except for having any food or medical supplies. But other than that, we've been ready to broadcast at home during an apocalypse, and I guess we just hoped that the apocalypse would be very intense and brief. Now we're prepared for a prolonged apocalypse of about, 8 or 9 hours, I would say, before the microwave popcorn that we have bought for the emergencies runs out. I actually didn't buy any. We had some. It was sitting around, and I said, well, people will want this when they're watching emergency movies, I guess. So we kept that. Stocking up pretty good, buying lots of soap and nice cleaners and everything, plus food to freeze, and trying to decide what's the smart way of going about everything. So far, people have been pretty good in the markets, but the paper goods, of course, are cleared out. I walked through a Target store yesterday, trademark, send me a check, whatever it is. Anyway, walked through, I saw 3 aisles in a row completely stripped of everything on the shelves. It was the home paper goods, so toilet paper, tissues, paper towels, etc. Even those humongous tissues that Kleenex makes that they say are really hand towels were gone. Have you seen those? The gigantic boxes? I think that's a really good idea and everything. But anyway, so I went with the different route. I bought more laundry detergent to wash towels more often, figuring that would be. Although really, honestly, maybe today, Bed Bath & Beyond for more towels, just so that we're not constantly waiting for the damn towels to get out of the dryer and we have plenty around. Seems like a good thing. Good idea to me. And I don't know. Anyway, the president went on television to try to, do what exactly? I don't know what he had in mind. I assume people said that you'll calm fears if you go on television and tell people what the plan is, but that didn't work. As it turns out, at least 3 major, I guess, totally upside down and backwards policy pronouncements, by which I mean the policies themselves, had they been implemented, would have been considered by the rest of the world to be upside down and backwards. But he also got the presentation of them all upside down and backwards and announced policies that don't exist. And I'm trying to figure out today, we all are, what was going on. I think the news still normalizing him really to an extent by saying, well, he gave the broad brush, a broad stroke overview of what the policy was going to be, and only afterwards did they go back and fill in details. But I am not at all convinced that the writers of the speech, which, as it turns out, were Stephen Miller and Jared Kushner, which is just an amazing thing all by itself, I think they just winged it and wrote the speech they wanted delivered and the policies they wished were true. And I think that a lot of the agencies were caught by surprise by what the policies were supposed to be according to the speech and simply sent their spokespeople out saying, nah, that's crazy. That's not what it is. What it really is this, this, and this. And I'm not entirely certain that the White House agrees with their interpretations of what the policy is going to be, but they haven't fired anybody yet. But for instance, of course, he went out and said we're going to impose a complete travel ban, a complete ban on travel from Europe for 30 days. And of course, that rightly panicked a lot of people. And I understand that lots of Americans hearing that news and that travel would be cut off at midnight on Friday or whatever it was. Went immediately to the airport, and people were going crazy, paying whatever money they had for a ticket home before the ban kicked in. People I saw on Twitter anyway, who knows whether that's right or not, claiming to have that other people were paying $20,000 for a ticket home. But Department of Homeland Security, a couple hours afterwards, came out and said, well, no. It's not a total travel ban. And it just became more and more porous as time went on. American citizens can come home. It's just that, other people can't come to us from Europe. Well, what about permanent residents? Oh, permanent residents, green card. Yeah, that too. Although, honestly, I'm not so sure that they mean that. And because they've differentiated between citizens and green card holders before. Unless Jared Kushner sold you the green card and you're from China, which is where he was selling the green cards to. So then it would be okay because we're so concerned about the virus or whatever. And anyway, yeah, so there's that. And then, of course, all trade with Europe was suspended for a moment last night. As the president said, basically it would affect both people and goods coming from Europe. And it should. I mean, if you're really looking to isolate the United States, I mean, there's no reason that a contaminated box of pasta is any less dangerous than a coughing person if you get one of those boxes of pasta and, I don't know, lick it, I guess. But whatever. If you wash your hands, you should be okay. But still, it didn't make any sense, and it panicked everybody, and I am sure that God only knows what the futures of the markets hold on that. But apparently they backtracked on that too. And maybe they should do that. But yeah, okay, trade won't be affected. Of course, he also wrote right in the speech, he made a absurd exception for the UK, which I interpreted as a sop to his pro-Brexit stance. Then Europe doesn't include the UK anymore. And the UK is good with us because Boris Johnson's just as crazy as I am. And I was pro-Brexit. And so we'll give them a break. We have a special we did a bilateral with them, and so we won't include them in it. And then, but immediately speculation begins. Is that just so that people can go to and from his golf courses in Scotland? Ireland would presumably be included in the European band, where he also has another golf course. So I'm not certain whether that's uniform across the board. I don't know how he'll get his special Sudafed if he isn't able to import it from Europe. But so I guess that's why the trade in goods will continue. The UK exception makes no sense. Plenty of people in the UK have the virus, as many as are some of the other countries from which travel is banned. And in fact, I learned yesterday, we didn't even get a chance to discuss it, the UK's health minister has got the virus. So I don't really know why the exception for the UK would make any sense, except as a political consideration. This, of course, offered up in the speech, during which the president also quite ludicrously said, now is the time to set partisanship aside, come together, et cetera, and then immediately A, launches into a political policy announcement, and B, 2 hours later is back on Twitter attacking Nancy Pelosi. The good news in all of this, besides the fact that Greg Dworkin is here to help straighten us out on things, is that Sarah Palin was busy at the time. As it turns out, as the guest singer on the Masked Singer semi-reality program, where she was performing that American classic, Sir Mix-a-Lot's, what the hell do they call it? Baby Got Back? Is that? I got no idea what to tell you about that one. She's... Well, I'm glad she's remaining busy. She keeps herself otherwise occupied. It's a tough time otherwise. Greg Dworkin, you're on Dancing with the Stars coming up soon, I believe. But thank you for coming in and sharing our time with us today. Hi, how are you?
Do I have to dance with Sean Spicer or with Rick Perry?
I said stars, and so you're free from both of those two. But you get your pick, except Tom Hanks and his wife, Rita Rilson. Who also have the coronavirus.
Yes, we know that because they were in Australia where you can get tested.
That's right. That's the big thing that everyone was saying, they got tested right away. But that's because they were in another country. They didn't go to another country.
Yeah, the other people that got tested right away were anybody who was friends with Trump.
Yes, I guess so.
Even if they didn't have symptoms and didn't meet criteria, but somehow they jumped the line.
Yes, although Trump still maintains he's not been tested and he doesn't even care because of how strongly he... something.
So I have a few things to say.
All right. I better let you do it.
Just to get it off my chest, Because
you don't want anything there now.
I'm a chest doctor, so
right.
And I guess it's okay. Let's put it this way. Jonathan Bernstein had a very nice summary who this morning he was sort of ruining because he said I wasn't harsh enough. But what he said is all of Donald Trump's ineptness at the job of presidenting and his personal pathologies came together Wednesday night in a short, awful, counterproductive address to the nation. And I think that sums it up. I would, put a nice, kind, positive spin on what Trump did. I think that Donald Trump succeeded in focusing the nation on how serious this is. He didn't do it because he was good. He did it because he was bad.
Yeah, okay. That's a good point.
Right? And then so after the NBA shuts down, Tom Hanks gets sick, and Trump is exposed as being a god-awful president who doesn't know what the hell he's doing. Everybody looked at each other and said, oh, my God, this is serious. Mm-hmm. And you could feel it. I mean, just a lot of stuff happened yesterday to bring this home that this is, like, serious now. So what else did he say? The headline is Trump's coronavirus speech was not especially reassuring. If anything, it gave the public a lot more to worry about. Well, if you wanted to focus the public's attention on it's time to worry and do things and shut things down, I can't think of a better way. Yeah.
Well, he did do that. That's a very interesting spin. You're very kind.
So, one of the key things the White House, Jonathan Bernstein wrote, wants to do when policy is going badly is to assure the public they can trust the president and the government in general to tell the truth. Getting stuff wrong undermines that, just as Trump's frequent factually incorrect statements about the coronavirus prior to his Oval Office speech have made it harder for people to trust him in the government. It's also useful if the government's thought of as competent. This kind of mistake doesn't help any of this. And then there's all the stuff missing from the speech.
Yes.
But the core was counterproductive. The vast majority of Americans, the risk is low. Young and healthy people can expect to recover fully. The highest risk is for elderly population with underlying health conditions. The elderly population must be very, very careful. That's what he's saying. In particular, we're strongly advising nursing homes essentially shut down. Okay.
Yeah.
But first he told young and healthy people, you're fine, don't worry. If grandpa dies, it's not your fault. Just go about your business. I mean, that was a terrible message to give.
Grandpa thinks so. That's for sure.
Yeah. What I wrote this morning on Twitter is it's important that right now the media get a grip. The shock, the anger, the fear that Trump is not up to the job is palpable. Do you look to the White House for leadership? Because we have to. That was a line that one of the MSNBC correspondents, Casey Hunt, said on the air. We have to look to the White House for leadership. It was like almost a plea. And so you know where their mindset is coming from. Yeah. And you know what? Media has to do their own mitigation, or they're going to unwittingly pass bad information because it's from this White House. And they haven't done that from day one. They just repeat Trump lies and say, if anybody complains, let's both sides this. They have to stop. And I think it was a serious message for them, too. That's, part of the whole discussion this morning. Now, the talking opinionated heads are a little bit freer, a little bit have more freedom to go ahead and speculate or opine that Trump was a disaster. But the straight reporters have to start doing it. So I also wrote, I have more hope that media will get and understand this, not necessarily Fox News or the Republicans in Congress, but I think a few will break and call for what's done. Even Tucker Carlson is doing that now. Pelosi is going to be de facto president. She's got a bill this morning coming out of the House, which is essentially relief for coronavirus people thrown out of work and some other things that are important. And she's going to give it to the Senate. The Senate's going to have to sign on to it because they know they don't have a plan of their own, and there's zero leadership in the Senate. They only know how to block things. They don't have anything to offer. They can't offer anything unless the president gives the okay. So it's going to come from the House, and the Senate will sign on, and Trump essentially will be forced to sign it. And there'll be a day or two of wrangling over that, but that's what's going to happen because nobody can afford to dither on this, and they know that. So it's just a really interesting dynamic. And I wrote, I don't say this as a partisan. I say it's a practical way to deal with a public health crisis until folks have their adjustment reaction and catch up. And by that, I mean people in government. The fact that somebody's aide got sick yesterday was a big wake-up call. It's in the building.
Yeah.
And so pay attention. This now involves you because your staff might get sick. And I know you don't go to work, but your staff does, and your staff interacts with other staff. You know more about that than I do. But the idea that staff don't talk to each other or meet or discuss stuff is ridiculous. So if your staff is infected, that means your staff is infected. And if your staff is infected, that means I might get affected. That really focuses the attention.
Yes. Well, it tends to. Although there was, we have lots of video over the last couple of days of lots of people who are now in either seriously worried or in serious trouble, mocking the importance and seriousness of the situation and who now are either quarantined or have the virus.
And not only that, a lot of their even from quarantine mocking stuff like Ted Cruz happened before Trump's speech. Let's see what happens after Trump's speech.
Yeah, I guess true too.
Look to your governors and public health departments for guidance. This is the practical stuff that you should do. In other words, understand that what you have to do is bypass the White House. Look to state and local governments. Washington's doing it. New York is doing it. Cuomo's leading. Inslee's leading. There are websites you can go to from those two states that have wonderful advice about what to do and how to prepare. You're also about to see how good, and they are, your local public health departments are. So there's Nacho and Asto, the state and territorial epidemiologist, and the National Association of City and County Health Officials. They're going to be good follows. These are real organizations that exist that you don't know about that do great messaging. They're invisible because you don't need them unless you need them. They're going to be exhausted, but they're going to be good. So take it seriously. Do what needs to be doing. Get your messaging from there, and don't get it from the White House.
Yeah. Nacho. That's great.
Nacho, N-A-C-C-H-O.
What a great selling point that is. And the Supreme Leader.
Now with cheese.
Right. I'm the Nacho Supreme Leader.
Exactly.
And you can quote me on that. Yeah, well, that's cool. It's a nice, it's a fun bit.
You'll remember it.
Yeah,
this
right.
This is the time to focus on the experts. I wrote the medical and science folks like Tony Fauci, who's very good and who was pretty straight when he talks to people.
Oh, yeah.
And non-political parts of the CDC emergency group. Your local hospital will be messaging, your local health departments and local media will be messaging, and the paywalls are down for all of the traditional media, which is good. You can go to the New York Times and read coronavirus stories for free now. And there's no need for overreaction. Just do what needs to be done. The virus isn't a hoax. Large crowds of 250 or more need to be avoided. Sports leagues need to suck it up like the NBA and wash your hands and wash your hands and wash your hands, 20 seconds, and soap if you can't find the cleaning gel, the Purells of the world. Don't worry about it. Soap is better. Do that.
Yes, good point.
Help will come from the feds in terms of emergency programs and legislation through Nancy Pelosi. Support it. Don't fight it. All hands on deck. And the new normal starts today.
Okay, I think we're kind of ready for it. At least we are here.
We are. I mean, we've been talking about this for a couple of weeks. So for your listeners, this is not a surprise, but a lot of people are waking up and saying, what? What just happened? And then, of course, the stock market.
Yes, well, we'll wait on that. Of course, we have to do a whole segment here before we find out what's actually happening in the real live stock market. The futures have their guess. Man, it is.
Well, the futures are down 1,231 points right now.
Well, so who cares?
So we have a pretty good idea what's going to happen.
It hasn't happened yet.
Let's just put it this way.
All right, we'll do it.
Expect circuit breakers.
Yeah, again.
Yeah.
We didn't have.
We're in a bear market. That means we've dropped 20%. So it's no longer a bull market. The 11-year-old run is done.
Yeah. How are your 409ks?
Don't treat it like your face. Don't look.
Yeah,
don't touch.
Okay. All right. Man. So let's see. Speaking of the information from last night and getting it right or whatever, there was an interesting segment that I viewed on CNN last night, which has become controversial and is also murdering my mentions. But and I think there's a mistake in the reporting here, or a mistake in the interpretation of the data. But Sanjay Gupta was on CNN last night because he's the health reporter, of course. But I saw him after the president's speech sitting on a panel there. And Don Lemon had at that point taken over and is leading the panel. And Sanjay Gupta says, look, Don Lemon asks him basically, how are they doing? And is this thing really under control, and what's the story with testing? Is it really ramping up like the president said? And he said, it's really not. And here's the deal. He says, I want you to read this thing off my phone. And he used his phone to call up the CDC's webpage. And he said, I want you to read off of here. There's a table of the number of tests conducted by the CDC yesterday and at the public health labs around the country yesterday. I'd like you to take a look at it. Would you read for everybody here how many tests the CDC performed yesterday? And he says, this number here, it's 0. And what about this number here for labs around the country? 8. And so that was kind of stunning information, I thought. And I just was so taken aback by it that I did tweet about it, and then I videotaped the segment just so everybody could see what had been broadcast. And there was huge response to that, for one thing, because people were worried and upset about those numbers, and lots of pushback too. And of course, lots of people tweeting and saying that can't possibly be true because my local university or this state university or that university said they conducted X number of tests on Thursday or last week or this week or yesterday or even today, and so this number has to be wrong, and it certainly could be. And then I guess the best information that I saw, the best explanation I saw for it was that it did say on the CDC website, there was a little notation, a little footnote there that said the information for the past 2 days or so is considered to be pending information, which I assume means can still change, i.e. labs around the country haven't called the CDC and said how many they've tested.
Well, a couple of points about that. And again, early exit poll data, right?
Yeah,
the stuff that you see here is not correct and won't be updated for a few days. It's in normal situations like flu, we don't even update for a week at a time. So hour-to-hour results, I know that's what people want, but it's like waiting for California to count their votes. It's not going to happen that fast. Now, Scott Gottlieb, who is an expert, I don't care if you don't like him. I don't care if he's a Republican. I don't care if you think he's pharma. He's excellent. Mm-hmm. And he posted this morning, we updated our data on total coronavirus testing capacity in the U.S. Remember, the figures for total capacity do not reflect the actual number of tests being performed, but the number of patients who could potentially be screened daily if every lab were testing at maximum capacity. And they have, that list. It's about 17,000 per day that we could do right now if everybody's up to speed, which at the moment they are not. Okay?
That's a problem.
And what happens is that the only data that gets reported to the CDC automatically or by convention or is being done is if your state lab does the test. However, Gottlieb says in a different area, a different set of tweets, that essentially the plan is to use Quest and other private labs to do a lot of the testing, and they are not required to report to anybody.
No.
And normally don't. And that may change, during this particular situation here. But Quest and LabCorp, for example, just give you an idea, New York Presbyterian Hospital can do 30 tests a day. Quest can do 1,000. LabCorp can do 1,500. And the state of California is capable of doing about 8,000. Okay. And nationwide, 63 public health labs can do about 3,000 tests a day. Just to put this in perspective. So the bulk of the testing is going to be either private-public combos like in California or places like Quest or LabCorp. Some of the turnaround time for those tests are 3 to 5 days. With a backlog, it might even be a week.
Oh.
CDC can only do 200 tests a day.
Okay.
Now, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is actually launching a here's a swab, test your own, send it in kind of thing. We'll see how that goes.
Yes.
But that's going to give you different data. That's not going to be used for diagnostics. That's going to be used for screening. For diagnostics, there's still going to be a bottleneck because not all the labs are up and ready to do this. It'll probably take another week. And it's still being limited by your doctor thinks you need it. I think after Trump's speech yesterday, all the public health departments will free up the criteria. Oh, you weren't in Iran, so you can't get this test. I mean, there was the famous by now story of the person who was in Italy who went to France and then from France came home. And at the airport in France, everybody's exposed, but France wasn't on the list. So because they came directly from France, they couldn't get tested,
Yes.
that kind of stupid stuff.
Yep.
And that's going to change.
Maybe.
But you can't look at it and say, oh, there's zero testing. There's a lot more than that going on, but not nearly enough. And we just don't really know the real number. And by the way, we don't know the results, which is really an important thing.
Yes, it would be nice to find out what the results were. Tom Hanks was able to find out,
But he's in Australia.
Yeah.
So, all of that is true. So the thing about testing that makes it such a focal point is, first of all, they're lying to us about it.
That's not good.
Redfield still won't tell Congress and the public why it is that we had to rely on faulty CDC tests and they wouldn't agree to simply go ahead and do the German-developed WHO testing, which we could have done that every other country is doing. And Congress tried to, on the Republicans on the House in hearings, tried to make it into but won't you admit that our tests are better than theirs, and that's why there was a delay? I mean, that's the tack they were taking. Instead of trying to fix the problem, they were still playing politics.
Yeah, and
it's infuriating.
Seen some speculation that, important people may own stocks in companies here that are trying to develop
or whether
tests
it's
of their own.
sheer xenophobia and USA and America first and we do it better, and how could you use one of those
so
foreign
many
tests?
Good reasons to be doing that. Yeah, it's been pretty amazing. And
if you don't believe that, just listen to Trump's speech last night.
Yeah, well, that'll reassure you, I'm sure.
But the xenophobia is just like spilling through.
Yeah, well, it was purposely part of it, and that's how they came to the realization that Stephen Miller had such a huge part in writing this speech. And he started the first words out of his mouth: the foreign virus. The virus doesn't actually know what its immigration status is, but
virus
I guess
don't
it
care.
does now. Right. All right, we'll be back in 2 minutes with probably great news. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Greg Dworkin still with us to give us the good information that is actually true about the coronavirus situation. Oh, by the way, our schools are closed. There we go.
What a shock.
Yeah.
You didn't see that coming, did you? At least not if you listened to the White House, but you did if you listened to me.
Right. But I did. I was a little bit shocked because I think they made the decision very quickly, which may say something about
just
the
like
president's
the NBA
speech, actually. Right. Possibly. But yeah, I mean, as of yesterday during the day, they were saying, we're watching, we're monitoring. Maybe we'll do a little bit what Fairfax is doing and prepare for online classes. And then this morning, we got the, snow closed school telephone call, except this time it said it's snowing coronavirus.
Right. So one of the people that should be running this whole federal response is Tony Fauci for science information and direct messaging to the public. One is Deborah Birx, who's pretty experienced with bureaucratic behind-the-scenes stuff for logistics, and another who legitimately could make a claim to being the one to be the new pandemic czar. Would be Scott Gottlieb. Again, FDA, so he knows how to get stuff through regulatory stuff, and that's what you need right now. And this is a thread he wrote 2 hours ago. In the U.S., we face two alternatives, but hard outlooks with, he's calling it COVID-19, we're calling it coronavirus, that we follow a path similar to South Korea or one closer to Italy. Now, Italy's falling apart right now, so that's important. We probably lost chance to have an outcome like South Korea, and my editorializing is that's because the White House screwed up. We must do everything to avert the tragic suffering being borne by Italy. It starts with aggressive screening to get people diagnosed, while testing capacity expands. It's not evenly distributed to places most needed, and we're far behind current caseload. To many people, they still can't get screened, so we can't identify clusters and isolate disease. In some respects, our fate rests on the entities that are capable of sharply ramping testing and distributing the services nationally. Academic labs can serve their institutions, but only big national clinical labs like LabCorp and Quest can fill the void. A lot rides on them now. Again, my editorial, I know you hate the idea of giving this to private industry, but if you need it done in the next 3 days, it's the only way it could happen. You don't have to like it.
Okay,
right? What the federal government has to do is make sure you don't get charged an arm and a leg for this. And by the way, it isn't just the test. You could walk into an emergency room, think you need the test. They could decide you don't get the test, or you do and it's free, and you still get charged $10,000. Because all those other charges are not covered. That's why the bill that Pelosi has this morning is so important. I'm not saying it's going to cover all of that, but that's the kind of thing the federal government has to be working on.
All right.
These are great American companies led by outstanding management teams, staffed with deeply committed public health mind people who live in communities hurt by this virus. Now, again, I'm not here to extol companies. I don't own stock in any of them. I never have. I think it's immoral and unethical, but you need them right now. So just suck it up, okay? Don't at me. The national interest turns on their efforts. We must scale their ability to sharply expand screening. It's true. They're the only ones that can do it. That means getting diagnostic kits approved that the companies can run in their automated platforms to dramatically scale testing. FDA is the one that approves, and he's ex-FDA, and that's why I'm looking to him as a source. One of these, only these big national chains have throughput, scale, and ordering systems to fill the void that was created. So in other words, back in 2009, when we wanted to be able to get Tamiflu to everybody during a flu pandemic, the federal government said, oh, it's easy. We'll just stockpile it, give it to the hospitals. And the hospitals said, no, don't do that. We can't do that. We can't sell it. You already bought it. And we don't want people in the hospital. Give it to the pharmacies. The pharmacies are set up to do this. How do you get medications? Your doctor orders it. You go to the pharmacy. Use the damn system. Now, that was problematic because the Fed had already bought it. So what do you do with already bought drugs? And you give it to the pharmacy. Do they resell it? How does that work? Nobody figured that out. Just to give you an example of what kind of planning and simple stuff isn't so simple, but the whole idea was you use the structure you have. You don't recreate one instantly. That's not going to work. The only thing that can scale up to distribute medicines in some non-haphazard fashion throughout the country are prescription and then go to the pharmacy. That's what you use. Right now, the only way that you can scale up and get tests done is to do the private lab system that all the doctors are already using. We all use this.
True.
You send your patient, you get the lab, you get the result. We know how this works. The systems are already there. Scale them up. That's what Gottlieb is saying. It's not a paean to, capitalism.
Okay.
Public health labs, he adds, have been an outstanding pillar. They're working around the clock. They're the nation's backbone, but they aren't richly funded, and they're being maxed out against current facilities. Only clinical labs have the ability to sharply scale the effort. So, business is leading the way on mitigation and social distancing, filling a void left by policymakers. That means the White House.
Yes. Right.
Shutting down NBA games isn't enough. This must be practiced in places large and small gatherings, parties, all should be postponed for the next month or two. So if you've got a 10-person birthday party, think about it. If you've got a 50-person luncheon for your employees, absolutely.
Okay. I got one of those.
We need to create surge capacity in hospitals. Congress must support the effort. Patients and providers can too. Elective procedures should be postponed. Hospitals should lower volumes everywhere they can. Send the healthy people to the nursing homes. Oh, no, that's not a good idea. That was our flu plan. And right now, maybe that's not the greatest idea in the world unless you're going to beef up the nursing homes. And by the way, the people who work in the nursing homes are underpaid and undertrained. And so that's a big deal. And maybe that's something you do in terms of your prep work. Get your visiting nurse and health departments in there now, training them.
Yes.
Okay, that's what you do at the time. So we need to prepare for an influx of cases, which is true, next week. Social separation works. Every day we delay hard decisions. Every day leaders don't demand collective action. The depth of epidemic will be larger. That's why we're sounding the alarm and have been for a couple of weeks now. We must act. We have narrow windows to avoid a worst outcome. The virus is firmly rooted in the cities. We're losing time. We'll get through this. It'll end. We have 2 hard months. We need to sacrifice some of the trappings of normal life to reduce the scope. Suck it up, March Madness. If you don't like what the NCAA did, too bad for you. It's happening. We must protect the vulnerable. We must act collectively in common interest, and we must work together. That's his message. I heartily approve. And for those of you who still think it's a hoax because you watch Hannity, things are going to shut down, and that's simply an unsustainable bubble. Even the people who follow this closely, the McKay Coppins and the others who follow Fox News and watch the bubble, call it that. Mm-hmm. And they point out, yeah, we know that a lot of people are getting their social media, Facebook stuff and Fox News stuff and this and that and everything else, and they seem impervious. It can't last because reality is going to slap them in the face. The difference between the people who aren't Fox News junkies and those who are is those who aren't have been semi-prepared for this as this bubbles up over the course of the week. And you hear podcasts like this and others and regular news and the virologists who are on MSNBC every day and so on and so forth. And the Fox News people who haven't heard it, they're going to get just hit and slammed with this, and they're not going to know how to react. So, but it's not like they're not going to know, and it's not like they're not going to, understand, because it's going to get shut down around them.
Yeah, eventually KFC will close and reality will set in.
Yeah, pretty much.
I suppose. Yeah,
not just that. Well, the shooting ranges.
Oh, right, true. Yeah.
When you shut the shooting ranges down, people will say, "Wait, what?"
Right.
Well,
they could
we'll
just
keep
say,
them open, but you got to be, 10 feet away from everything.
Every other
well, I already
booth.
am. I said, well, I'm a great shot.
Right. I'll shoot anybody that comes within 10 feet of me. How about that?
I'm not just picking on them. Those smaller businesses in Italy right now, the only businesses are open are pharmacies and food stores. Everything else is shut.
Well, that might just be because they're Italian.
Throughout the country.
Yeah. All right. Well,
to close down the restaurantes and the cafes? Are you kidding? That's a big deal.
I thought you said food or food stores. Oh, I see.
Food
Cook
stores.
your own. All right. So everybody's grandma has to cook. Is it really a big deal? Italy's well prepared for this. No, it's been pretty disastrous. I don't know what else to say about it. I did like the note. I'll make a special note of the point that you were saying. The nursing home staffs in particular, understaffed, underpaid, etc. Yeah, we will very quickly, and may already be there, approach if it doesn't quite ring true to you. Consider that this is the coronavirus and everybody's panicking. We will very quickly reach the I don't get paid enough for this stage, where people, even if they're not sick, will just stop showing up and saying, what am I running this risk for? I get paid nothing. I need to stay home and take care of my family. I'm better off staying home and staying away from the illness, not going and helping anybody for nothing. Yeah, that's serious. We're exposing an awful lot of serious social weaknesses here, and I guess earlier on this week and end of last week, we found Republicans suddenly considering the idea that maybe taking care of other people and making it affordable for them to get health care was actually a good idea, but only specifically for this, or that paid sick leave might not be a terrible idea, but again, specifically only for this. Trump, in his speech last night, said he would be taking strong executive action, hopefully followed up by legislative action so that it would remain legal, he said. Yep. We'll be making sure that people get paid, but only for coronavirus. So have your doctor send me a note.
Something. So, again, I tweeted to repeat, you're about to see how good your local public health departments are, and they are. And that's Nacho and the Association of State and Territorial Health Officials, known as ASTO, A-S-T-H-O. They're great, important follows. Prepare your Twitter feed for reliable expert sources. Find your local health department. And somebody named Maddie Quinn retweeted that and cosign, she wrote.
Yeah. Oh.
So who's Maddie Quinn? Maddie Quinn is a writer, public health professional, former health journal, and director of public relations for ASTO.
Well, no wonder they
co-signed. She liked it.
Yes, well, or 1 over sign, same answer. So, okay. As long as we keep it mathematically correct. By the way, Scott Anderson says anecdotally he finds that the Fox fans that he knows are buying gold. That's their usual response.
Right. Well, that means the message is getting through.
Yes, so that's
okay.
true. There,
I mean, let them.
Yeah, that's
they
a good
they
point.
can buy bleach from Glenn Beck for all I care, but at least they're getting the message.
Yes, true. Don't drink it. It's interesting though. The Fox fans that I know are buying gold and eating silver. So you tell me what that means.
That is pretty funny and
not
very
sure why
accurate.
That's happening, but I don't know.
I mean, if you're a heavy metal fan, this is great.
I guess so. No, literally. I mean, you know what I'm talking about, certainly.
No, literally, heavy metals. I'm into it.
People are eating the silver solutions.
Like some of the best bands, and by the way, I buy gold and eat silver. That's how much I'm into it.
I guess so. But this is a big deal. People buy these silver tinctures, and I think maybe in medieval times they discovered it has a very slight antibiotic.
The funny thing
property,
is if you eat too much silver, you could turn blue.
You do.
Like the Smurfs.
Right. That's what they did, I think.
And maybe that's why they look that way.
Right. Or maybe that's why they're Smurfs.
I mean, maybe it's permanent.
Could be. And I dress
maybe
up like a Smurf
hypoxic.
so that it looks normal, believe it or not.
Anyway, here's another Twitter little thing that I did this morning as well, which I also thought was important, but not as important as the first one. But it's getting a different audience, and that's the journalists. And what I wrote is, it's time to polish your Twitter skills. Be kind. Don't retweet unverified news unless you trust the source. We all make mistakes, but call it back and say so if you accidentally do. You and I accidentally tweeted something that wasn't true, and that's exactly what we did. And if you're going to tweet something that seems to be really important, identify the source if it's not commonly known. It's one thing to retweet the New York Times. It's another thing to retweet Helen Branswell, where I will add she's an experienced health reporter. Or Jeremy Kondik or Scott Gottlieb, and I'll add public health expert. I mean, you need to know where you're getting your news from and who they are. And also be ultra super careful about satire tweets. Make sure you know what you're doing. Right now, this is not the time to really be throwing everything out to see what's funny and what's not. Think about what you're doing twice before tweeting. And also be aware and read up on the problem. I included a Voxer, a Vox explainer. False news stories travel faster and further on Twitter than the truth. And also this one, which I thought was pretty interesting. And this is from PR Week for the public relations people. They're one of their trade journals. Yeah. It shouldn't have to be said, they said. But here's some common sense advice for brands during coronavirus. Don't use the pandemic as a marketing opportunity.
Oh. Yes, that's true.
Well,
I'd love to see the
one of the things about David
lines.
that my audience that's listening to him, his audience may not know. They probably do if they listen to him regularly. David has experience in that world too.
Yes, a little bit. The marketing. That's why I say I'm curious to see. Well, what are the lines they're using? I mean, if it's award worthy, I'd like to hear it. Don't listen to it for medical advice, but what exactly are you talking about? I'm just kind of curious. It's an important time for brands on
they have
Twitter.
a picture of a cute dog.
Oh.
And somebody tweeted, nice. Sometimes you just need 44 seconds of cute dogs. Now that you're looking at us, pay attention to what we do.
Okay. Not so bad. As opposed to now is the time when all Americans will need quality footwear.
Buy gold and eat silver.
Yes. People are doing it. By the way, interesting tweet I did just see fly by that questioning our status in the world, that Italy, of course, falling apart with its coronavirus problems. China has offered to send their medical experts to assist Italy, whereas the United States, it is pointed out, has cut Italy off and said goodbye, no Italians allowed. Everyone, good luck. And it's a good question. Now, who's the superpower here? This is the tweet from Anne Applebaum, who a checkmark kind of person, a famous author, as it happens, writer for The Atlantic as well. I've seen her book out at the stores, Red Famine, if you ever saw that one. Interesting retelling of the Ukrainian famine under the Soviet system. But anyway, it's a good question. China has reacted to the outbreak of coronavirus in Italy by sending aid. The U.S. has reacted by suspending flights. They're going to remember that, I think, in Italy and all across Europe. Bad news.
Bad news.
Yeah.
Very bad news. What else can we tell you here? That's,
You can't tell me
basically, I guess, my spiel for today.
Oh.
There are reliable sources. Scott Anderson will help you find them in the listings. Watch Congress to see what they do, because they're going to lead on this, and you'll get a better idea of what's going on. And if you're on Twitter or social media, find your experts. I mean, identify them now. Cull your list. I said this last week, but it's true. So that you know who you can look for reliable information. It ain't going to be the White House.
Okay.
Separately, there's nothing wrong with putting a tremendous amount of political pressure on congressional Republicans and Trump to follow Pelosi's lead. They'll want to. They know this is an issue, and they know they don't know what to do, and they know there's something hamstrung because, Trump needs to say yes before they can jump. They know that. So they're not going to mind if Pelosi leads, whatever they complain about it in public. Just do it.
Okay. Yeah, well, we'll try and force them to do it. Do the best we can with that. All right. Weird.
All right. Meanwhile, just to give you an idea of what's happening here in this country, this is New York Times, which, by the way, has made all of its coronavirus stories free, no paywall.
Where's my
Inside the hospital, slammed by coronavirus. This is Evergreen Health back in Seattle. Nurses used menstrual pads to refurbish gear. Quarantined staff have been called back to work. We used face shields are cloudy with bleach. Staff still call in. If you need me, I'm available.
All right.
That's what they do.
Yeah. Here's an odd thing. I don't know. Just happened to catch my eye because of the weird words involved. But it's from Heidi Presbella from NBC News, tweeting that she says, true story. So it's anecdotal, I guess. She's maybe she heard it. True story. At a Target in Virginia, I'm familiar, I overheard a woman loudly calling it all propaganda. Of course, Yeah. And she says, I called her on it. She claimed to be a nurse from West Virginia, which is entirely possible. It's lots of people will come over here during the day. Anyway, staff is keeping patient nostrils moist, so it's all okay. And I was just sort of curious as to what sort of clinical value. It's not something you usually hear. Don't worry about it. The nostrils are moist. Is that?
Well, if your respiratory tract dries out,
I'm just curious.
You lose your protective mucous membrane layer.
All right.
But really, that has nothing to do with anything. Oh, it's always a good idea to evacuate your bowels and void as much as possible so that you don't get caught in a situation that would be uncomfortable. And what's that got to do with anything?
I don't know.
It's sound medical advice, and it's completely irrelevant.
Oh, well, okay. I was just wondering because I thought, well, it certainly presented as though it were irrelevant, and I thought, well, she's a nurse. Maybe there's something about moist.
Well, there's a better
explanation should be moist.
For that. She's an idiot. Okay, so just I hope Heidi dealt with that in some fashion, saying, no, I'm a national reporter, and actually it's real. Please pay attention and check with your local health department. Yeah. Now, John Favreau tweets, this bill contains this bill from the Democrats. Yes. Contains free coronavirus testing, paid emergency medical leave, extended unemployment insurance, food assistance, and help for healthcare workers. Sounds like a good bill, right?
It does.
Kevin McCarthy told Republicans he's opposed to the Democrats' bill, a blow to hopes for bipartisanship and perhaps a harbinger for the bill's prospects in the Senate. Maybe, maybe not. That's posturing. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, well, he's a traitor, so you shouldn't take his lead for anything.
Right. That's from Jake Sherman, who follows these things fairly closely. Story up momentarily on Politico, so maybe we can read about what his objections actually are, other than I didn't think of it first.
Yes, well, a Democrat did.
Or if you do this, it'll embarrass Trump because that's not what he wants. You got to get over this, guys. This is like, no playing around. Games are over now.
Yeah. Well, as many people pointed out yesterday, they had a chance to make it so that he wouldn't be president for this garbage, but they said they wanted him, and now they own him.
Right. Andrew Yanks looked at the bill and said, well, apparently I should have been talking about pandemics instead of automation.
Oh.
Everybody should get $1,000. Right?
Yeah, right. Again, we're finding alternative ways to the same policy ideas, and it's not a bad thing. I guess it means your policy is pretty
He missed
versatile.
his window. He missed his opportunity.
That's true.
I've always been talking about pandemics. I don't know what's with you with this automation stuff.
Yeah.
The robots don't get viruses.
That's true. And that may be the reason that they replace us eventually, but
Right,
we still
exactly.
need the money. Okay, robots don't need the money.
They don't.
All right. What else? Hey, any other diseases that we should know about? How's dysentery?
Well, I don't know. Let's
doing
since
these
it's
days?
now 9:30, let's just dial in and see what's going on the market. Oh,
Yes.
we're down 1,952 points, or
Oh.
8.29%.
That's all.
So we're going to hit 20,000 soon.
Excellent. Well, remember, we were all very excited about that. There used to be hats. Dow
We
to
were just at
20,000.
27, so.
True. But the excitement is about crossing a threshold. It doesn't really matter which direction you're coming from.
Yes. Well, speaking of thresholds, Standard & Poor 500 dropped 7%, triggering New York Stock Exchange circuit breaker trading halt for 15 minutes.
Oh, they did it. Okay.
No, that was 15 hours ago. So
Oh.
where are we at here?
What?
Where's some local stuff? I guess that hasn't happened yet because the market just opened. So
They did it
at
pretty fast last
9:51 a.m., again, market down 1,952, looking at the Dow Jones. And for those of you who are S&P fans, maybe I'll go over to the Wall Street Journal and see what they have to say.
Oh, I think you're right.
S&P 500 is down 8.11%. They're down 222. I find it easier to follow the Dow Jones simply because, the numbers have a better feel for me. I know what 200 versus 2,000 means
Yes.
when it's up or down. And today, the Dow Jones right now is 21,118 in the red and moving. We're going to be 9% in just a moment. I think it's safe to say that Trump's speech wasn't totally reassuring to the markets.
I guess not. But you were right about that. The S&P did, in fact, trigger the New York Stock Exchange to halt trading for 15 minutes this morning.
Yeah,
So,
okay.
All right. I mean,
Yeah, apparently. So anyway, there you have it.
they're getting paid for doing nothing, those traders.
Right.
Outrageous. Where's my bailout?
Don't touch your savings. Just leave them.
Not with your hands. God.
And
Rear
certainly don't
face.
touch them. And don't lick them.
Even if you have it, don't
Right.
lick your savings.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do not
true.
lick your 401k or your 403b. Just
Yes.
don't even touch it. Okay. And, do the things you need to do. Think about social distancing. Think about those small parties.
I
Certainly
gotta
the
think
large
about
ones
that
are
one.
out, but think about the small ones. Do what you need to do. It's serious. And don't invite that nurse from West Virginia.
Right. Although, if you're dry, might be a good idea. She'll moisturize
Right. Just
your
because you're a
nostrils.
nurse or a doctor doesn't mean you know everything. I mean, I know plenty
Aren't there
of
stupid
anti-vax
doctors?
nurses, unfortunately,
Oh, yeah?
but they can, with data and peer pressure and information, be swayed. Doctors, not so much. At least the ones who are totally adamant against vaccines but make money off of being that way are
yeah.
impossible.
You have explained that.
But the ones who are otherwise skeptical, data is data. And the fact of the matter is, you really have to start taking things in your own hands and doing what's right, and put pressure locally. Local health is public health. Public health is local health. And that's really who you should be looking for guidance. If you're in Seattle, you're going to find your schools closed. Don't be shocked. If you're in New York, the same.
Virginia.
The advice is do it everywhere before you have super problems.
Yes. And I think that's what was driving things for our local school system.
Trump convinced everybody it was serious. So I'm going to leave you with that, and
Okay.
you'll fill everybody else in on what's happening locally.
And Nacho, them too.
Nachos. I'm going to eat my nachos and sprinkle them with Astos. And,
And silver.
take care. And I'll be back on Monday, and we'll see where the country's at.
Okay, excellent. We'll be doing the show from isolation, and it goes on just the same.
Wash your hands. Keep
Yeah.
your finger out of your nose. Take care,
Right.
and we'll
Even
talk.
if it's moist. Okay, thank you very much. We'll do that. I have taken your advice and the advice of many others as well, not only washing hands, but if you're out there and you're panicky because, and I was a little worried for a little while, like there's no hand sanitizer. They said I need hand sanitizer. You don't. As Greg pointed out, soap actually, and I read a little bit about it too, soap actually works better. I read a little bit of the physics of it, I guess, and the biology of it. The glycerin in the soap, I guess it is. Alcohol will do the same thing, of course, but it breaks down the membrane of the virus and they basically explode if you wash your hands with enough, or wash them for long enough, essentially. The soap will do the trick. And it actually, I guess, the advice that they're giving you, wash your hands for 30 seconds. And have you seen, there's diagrams also circulating about exactly how you wash your hands and different techniques for washing your hands. And if you do that, you end up, if you follow those directions, getting rid of more of the virus than you will with a quick squirt of hand sanitizer, even high alcohol hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer, again, just sort of reminder, is sort of an emergency measure or something you can do when you're unable to wash your hands. But so buying soap, it's been really interesting running through the stores in the last couple of days and seeing hand sanitizer just been gone for days. Huge blank areas, empty areas of the shelves, but lots of hand soaps around. And then in the last day or two, all the soap that calls itself antibacterial is gone. And but there's lots of other soap still available, including bar soap, by the way. But everyone wants the liquid pump soap because I think that's more convenient and maybe feels like it might be more hygienic than picking up a bar of soap and rubbing it all over your infected hands. And then you clean your hands, and then the soap is dirty and covered with things. So, that's a real thing, of course. But anyway, I find that the shelves are emptied of hand sanitizer and antibacterial soap, but plenty of regular soap that maybe even smells nice is still available. And so if you're worried about it, go get yourself a whole lot more of that. And it will do the trick and even serve you better. It won't help you if you're outside the house. But there, I guess the gloves that they've been recommending that you get, the latex gloves, can help perhaps and reduce the need for putting more alcohol on your hands. So the other thing I'm finding is people washing their hands as instructed, and even they've got the hand sanitizer, put the hand sanitizer on, and it stings like crazy because their hands are so dry, the skin of their hands. So treat yourself well, get yourself some moisturizer too, so that your hands don't chap and crack and become another vector for getting infections, whether it's coronavirus or anything else. Take care of yourselves. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's read up on a couple of other fun things about the coronavirus, and we can make all sorts. A whole political show can still be all about coronavirus. Although I wanted to kind of cast a quick glance around to see whether there's anything non-coronavirus related that we ought to catch up on, and there probably is, but I don't know what the hell it is. I can tell you that because my inbox here is stuffed with at least tangentially coronavirus-related information. All right, let's see. I mentioned that there's some speculation out there about why exactly the CDC is or had rejected the World Health Organization's test that I guess that Greg mentioned had been developed in Germany. I saw some Twitter personalities claiming that there was some connection perhaps with business interests, that there were American firms working on tests and either they wanted to boost the America First thing or Trump owned stock in those things. I don't know what kind of stock he really owns or not, but I guess that's a possibility. Rolling Stone's Tim Dickinson, though, put a piece out yesterday that I thought it might be worthwhile thumbing through, by which I mean moving through with my forefinger and middle finger on my magic trackpad. My thumb has almost nothing to do with it. The question the CDC won't answer about coronavirus testing. They won't answer it. That's like dramatic, scary music sort of situation. Why hasn't the Trump administration, though, embraced a reliable test made available by the World Health Organization? Let's find out what Tim has to say over there. And here illustrated with a picture of Trump's visit to CDC, wearing his campaign gear, which he's not supposed to be doing. But what are you going to do? That's the least of his sins at the moment. In his disturbing appearance at the Centers for Disease Control on Friday, followed up by a disturbing appearance from the Oval Office last night, President Trump bragged about the availability of testing for coronavirus. Quote was, anybody that needs a test gets a test, Trump said, adding, of the nation's public health authorities, they have the tests, and the tests are beautiful. Anybody that needs a test gets a test. This boast, unsurprisingly I'll say, was a lie. In many states, public health officials are rationing tests. An expose in The Atlantic on Monday reported that fewer than 4,500 Americans have been tested for the virus nationwide. The lack of testing in the United States stands in sharp contrast to comparatively smaller countries like South Korea, which has tested more than 100,000 people. Both South Korea and Germany are offering drive-through testing, where patients are swabbed in their own cars at a local health facility with test results within hours. Oregon was one of the early states with demonstrated community spread of the virus, but testing here has been rationed, given only to patients who have been hospitalized and had negative tests for diseases like flu and strep throat. Even with this tight restriction on testing, the state revealed it may run out of coronavirus test kits by Wednesday if it is not resupplied. In California, an anonymous whistleblowing nurse who treated coronavirus patients later became ill with COVID-19 symptoms, despite the fact that everybody's nose was cold and wet. This person says they were initially denied a CDC test, then told to wait until a ration test became available. This is not the ticket dispenser at the deli counter. I think we read this account, right? It's a public health emergency, this nurse wrote. I'm a registered nurse, and I need to know if I'm positive before going back to work caring for patients. In the United States, a primary stumbling block to widespread testing has been the stubborn decision by the CDC to stick to its own flawed testing methods. CDC rolled out a coronavirus test in February, only to discover a problem with one of the reagents critical to the test's reliability. Yet, as the CDC has scrambled to fix its test, another functioning test has been available. WHO has successfully provided a competing German-developed test to countries across the world, allowing them to better trace the spread of the virus, not only confirming in cases in sick patients, obviously sick patients, but tracking down contacts who may have a mild form of the illness but can still spread it to others. In a letter last week to Vice President Mike Pence, the administration's point person on coronavirus, I emphasized that wrongly. It's Mike Pence, obviously, who's the administration's point person on coronavirus. The letter is from Senator Patty Murray. I was heading towards accidentally making it sound like she was the administration's point person. Obviously not the case. Anyway, Patty Murray of Washington, one of the states hardest hit by the outbreak, in fact, the state hardest hit, it says, I don't know why I said one of, demanded answers. We need to understand what is going wrong around testing, she wrote, and the lack of transparency from the administration so far is unacceptable. Oh, well, I guess we won't accept it then. Now what? Murray's letter asked the Trump administration to please provide an explanation for why the COVID-19 diagnostic test approved by the World Health Organization was not used. On Friday, Rolling Stone asked the CDC to answer the same question about the WHO test. We also sought information on potential conflicts of interest, including whether the CDC's test was developed in-house or the work of a contractor. That's a good question. We asked for a list of all contractors who had a financial interest in providing the agency with reagents and other compounds or components of the test. Despite multiple follow-ups, CDC has not responded. Reached today, a CDC media staffer said the agency was overwhelmed with press requests, probably true, and was working through its backlog. Our questions, she said, were in the queue. Under the Trump administration, it seems the truth is also being rationed. Well, that's unfortunate. We didn't learn exactly what the reason is, why they won't answer the questions. It's just that they won't, and they have a giant backlog. Is that the answer? They have a backlog? Okay. Well, let's see. What else can we read about that? There was they mentioned the reagents, and I did see a story from Stat News, a source we went to the other day. I found it particularly interesting and useful, so why not head back there? Matthew Herper, who has nothing to do with herpes, by the way. Don't confuse the two of them. It's a health newsletter. And Helen Branswell, which is not Brainswell. She's not having any this is a very weird grouping of people for some reason. My mind is wandering today. I must have Probably some coronavirus. A shortage, though, this is the real news. Shortage of crucial chemicals creates new obstacle to U.S. coronavirus testing. I guess here's the reagent problem we were talking about. The push to increase testing in the U.S. for the novel coronavirus that causes COVID-19 has hit a new stumbling block. Shortages of key chemicals needed to start up and run the tests. That does sound like a big problem. In particular, one key product made by the diagnostics testing giant, Qiagen. It's Q-I-A. So how do you pronounce it? Qia or Qia? Q-I-A-G-E-N. Well, their key product apparently is in dwindling supply. The chemical is used to isolate the virus's genetic material, or RNA, so that it can be tested. Robert Redfield, the director of the CDC, told Politico, which first reported the story, that he is worried about the supplies labs have of the chemicals known as reagents. The availability of those reagents is obviously being looked at very strongly. Yes, I heard you. Being looked at, Redfield said Tuesday. I'm confident of the actual test that we have, but as people begin to operationalize the test, use them, they realize there's other things they need to do the test, like a number 2 pencil, for instance, would be helpful. If you were taking a standard sort of test, right? We have the test available. That's a good analogy, actually, right? We can test millions of American college-bound seniors with this SAT, this new SAT test that has been developed privately, I might add. And we have the capacity to test millions of students, but we are short of number 2 pencils. How many tests can we give? Got the books, got the Scantron sheets, got the Scantron sheet readers. No pencils. It's a weak point. Okay, so a Qiagen, maybe Qiagen, we'll call them that. A Qiagen spokesperson acknowledged that extraordinary demand was limiting the company's ability to supply some products and said workers at its Hilden, Germany, and Barcelona, Spain manufacturing sites were moving to work 3 shifts, 7 days a week in order to ramp up production. The company is also bringing on new staff and making better use of a site in Germantown, Maryland. This Germantown is in Maryland, the United States, not Germany, to try and make the test kits, which would be a good idea because if we are stopping all travel to and from Europe, maybe including trade, maybe not including trade, well, that would be something, wouldn't it? How amazing and how Trumpian would it be to shoot ourselves in the foot that way? We're stopping all trade with Europe because they're ridden with disease, but they're making a key component of all the tests in Germany and Spain, which, as you know, as I know, are in Europe. You know, too, listening to the show. The president, I'm not so sure. But, and who knows? This president could very easily cut off travel and trade to and from Germantown, Maryland by mistake. Anyway, I guess most of its stuff is made in Europe. And, well, I guess the good news is that they're trying to claim that the trade in goods won't be stopped. And that's probably true because that would just destroy everything. But okay. Anyway, still, that and other shortages related to test kits represent another hurdle in the effort to roll out diagnostics to detect whether patients are infected with the new coronavirus, a key step, obviously, in preventing or slowing its spread. Other countries, such as China and South Korea, have tested many thousands of patients, but the U.S. has lagged even as the virus has started to spread. There have been 647 cases of COVID-19 in the U.S. and 25 deaths so far, having conducted only 5,000 tests to date. The American Enterprise Institute estimates that the country may now have the capacity to run 15,000 tests a day, but that assumes the reagents are available. We are deeply concerned that as the number of tests increases dramatically over the coming weeks, clinical labs will be unable to deploy them without these critical components, the American Society of Microbiology said on its website. Increased demand for testing has the potential to exhaust supplies needed to perform the testing itself. Michael Mina, a pathologist and assistant professor in the Center for Communicable Disease Dynamics at the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, which of course is now closed, said that the lack of the QIAGEN kit and a similar one made by Roche represent a very big problem. These are usually very commercially available tests that every research lab uses. Molecular biology labs across the world use these, Mina said. They're very common, and we don't normally worry about them going out of stock. But at the moment, they are out of stock. Like hand sanitizer, I guess. So maybe you could just use soap instead of reagents. Mina said that not only is the QIAGEN product on back order, so is another that might be used from Roche, just like all the aloe vera gel is gone too, and alcohol. But part of the problem is that those reagents are used on different pieces of laboratory equipment made by their respective manufacturers. All labs wouldn't have both. I would love to say, yes, there's all these different options, Mina said, but we really run into problems because we can't actually use these kits if we don't have the instruments for them. The FDA said that it's monitoring the issue. That's nice. And it hosted a webinar and a town hall last week for the laboratory community, as well as fielded questions from manufacturers about alternative reagents, extraction methods, and platforms. The agency also posted an FAQ page Tuesday on coronavirus diagnostic testing that lists potential alternatives. Mina said he was unsure that the page would speed up getting tests running, but said it at least clarified what needed to be done. But the chemical for extracting RNA did not seem to be the only product running short as the U.S. tries to quickly ramp up its testing capacity. On Friday, Christopher Freeman, a laboratory administrator at Columbia University, sent an email to colleagues pleading for another product used for storing RNA made by Invitrogen, a unit of lab tools giant Thermo Fisher. He said his lab hoped to validate its COVID-19 test over the weekend, but that it needed the basic yet critical reagent that is required as per the FDA submission. He asked if any laboratory had the reagent stocked in its laboratory. Anybody got a cup of sugar? A Columbia spokesperson said that the lab received a 6-month supply of the necessary reagent from New York State and is in the process of validating its test. A Thermo Fisher spokesman said that the Invitrogen product should not be in short supply. You should not be that way, you product. But it was. But some experts in the laboratory industry say shortages may partly be the result of trying to have labs ready their diagnostics too quickly, and that preparations should have begun months ago. Mike Pellini, a doctor and longtime diagnostics executive, said that it has been too difficult for new tests to come online and be reimbursed. In this case, work that should have taken 2 months has had to be crammed into a few days or a week, said Pellini, and now a managing partner at Section 32, a venture capital firm. Industry has been prepared to engage for a while, but there was little receptivity on the other side until last week, Pellini said. So, a little confusing for me at the end there, but some interesting look at the logistics of getting this stuff. And I am always fascinated by the logistics and the process, and when they break things down and logistical planners are able to say, look, what's possible and what's not. I loved the discussion we've been having over the last couple of weeks about flattening the curve has been really fascinating to me. I thought my economics major son, whose college is not closed yet, by the way, might find the flatten the curve discussion very interesting, but you know how he is. He's 19. He doesn't find much of anything I have to say all that interesting. But it's been real interesting to me. Anyway, there's one or two other things that I've been holding on to for varying lengths of time. Let me grab this one, a Twitter thread that I've meant to read to you that was really more about the flatten the curve idea and helped illustrate it I thought, very nicely. And look at this. As a matter of fact, it's the work of Liz Specht, S-P-E-C-H-T, and you can find her under that name on Twitter, Associate Director of Science and Technology at the Good Food Institute. And it's been real interesting reading her write-up of, again, what the logistics and the numbers said about why COVID-19 posed a particular problem. And I guess that we've seen it borne out in Italy. So flattening the curve and the stories from Italy have illustrated this for us. But I thought she laid it out really nicely. Then I see also attached to this tweet is news that she says, she tweets, "I'm honored that Stat News invited me to publish my thread as a slightly more nuanced opinion piece, including new details such as the striking differences in hospital beds per capita between the U.S. and Korea. Maybe we ought to read the more refined, more nuanced version then. Isn't that what we ought to be doing?" But I had this nice tweet thread. Let's see. Well, a lot of the thread is actually just reprinted in here. So maybe we'll read it this way from Stat News. Big day for Stat News. Again, Liz Specht. This one ran on Tuesday, the 10th. What does coronavirus mean for the U.S. healthcare system? Some simple math offers alarming answers. So let's get alarmed. Much of the current discourse on and dismissal of, no longer being dismissed quite so often, I think, the COVID-19 outbreak focuses on comparisons of the total caseload and total deaths with those caused by seasonal influenza. And I was very much influenced by this and the thread that Greg read us yesterday, reporting or retelling the news as reported by the doctor on the ground in Italy. Between this thread and that thread, I've been, telling the people that I talk to, what's really concerning to me is not that I'm going to die of COVID-19 or that anybody in particular is going to die of COVID-19, though it clearly can happen and happens at 10 times the rate of the flu. But the real worry is that what will kill you is likely not the COVID-19, but whatever else may happen to you while everybody else is busy treating people with COVID-19. That's really what the thread from out of the hospitals in the Lombardy region of Italy was emphasizing. But this makes the point in a slightly different way. So again, much of the current discourse and dismissal of the outbreak focuses on comparisons to the flu. This many people usually die or whatever. So don't worry about it, I guess. These comparisons, though, can be deceiving, especially in the early stages of an exponential curve as a novel virus tears through an immunologically, naive population. That is to say, nobody has any immunity to this virus because it's never been in humans before. That's why it's so contagious, I guess. Anyway, perhaps more important is the disproportionate number of severe COVID-19 cases, many requiring hospitalization or weeks-long ICU stays. What does an avalanche of uncharacteristically severe respiratory viral illness cases mean for our healthcare system? How much excess capacity currently exists, and how quickly could COVID-19 cases saturate and overwhelm the number of available hospital beds, face masks, and other resources? That's the real problem. I think most people just think, well, you get the flu, I'll take some flu medicine. If I need to go to the hospital, I'll go to the hospital. I'm relatively young and healthy. I understand that it's bad for elderly or those otherwise at risk, but I'm not, and I don't mean to be selfish, but I think I can get taken care of. Well, I think you can't. That's the problem. And worse, I think you can't even if you get something else, or you crash your car on your way to get hand sanitizer. Who's going to take care of you? That's the real problem. All right, we'll go on with the article. This threat to the healthcare system as a whole poses the greatest challenge. Again, I love the logistics stuff. As I initially described in a Twitter thread, simple mathematics can derive rough estimates for how this might play out. Their first tweet is embedded here. I think most people aren't aware of the risk of systemic healthcare failure due to COVID-19 because they simply haven't run the numbers. Let's talk math. This exercise can inform our level of urgency and equip us to anticipate non-obvious second-order effects, some of which can be mitigated with proper preparation. As of March 8th, about 500 cases of COVID-19 had been diagnosed in the U.S. Given the substantial underdiagnosis at present due to limitations in testing for the coronavirus, let's say there are 2,000 current cases, a conservative starting bet. And of course, now we have over 1,000 confirmed anyway, so easy to imagine. We can expect a doubling of cases every 6 days, according to several epidemiological studies. Confirmed cases may appear to rise faster or slower in the short term as diagnostic capabilities are ramped up or not. But this is how fast we can expect actual new cases, detected or otherwise, to rise in the absence of substantial mitigation measures. That means we're looking at about 1 million U.S. cases by the end of April, 2 million by May 7th, 4 million by May 13th, and so on. Again, Greg's chessboard analogy applies here. And by the way, for the zero of you in this audience who were clinging to Trump's ridiculous theory that hot weather gets rid of coronavirus, or anything else for that matter, I remind you, Tom Hanks is in Australia. That's why he got tested so quickly. They actually are testing people down there. But remember, what's going on in Australia right now that isn't going on right here in North America right now in terms of weather? It's called summer. And you might even remember that it was effing hot in Australia pretty recently. Now, the heat wave the serious killer heat wave had passed before coronavirus showed up, I guess, in Australia. But it's been summer there for some time. If the summer weather made coronavirus miraculously disappear, as the president said, then you wouldn't find it in Australia. And they've got 100 plus cases in Australia, including Tom Hanks. Although I did see somebody tweeting for some reason about Australia, saying, well, they only have one case, which is wrong even if you don't, count anybody who's not in Tom Hanks's family is at least 50% off the mark, 100% off the mark. So I don't know where that idea comes from, but certainly the idea that summer kills coronavirus, there's a summer somewhere on this planet. Let's ask it. Oh, no, it doesn't work? Okay, so forget about that. All right, so again, all the studies say these cases will double every 6 days. And that's pretty much tracked here and elsewhere where they've been looking at the cases. Anyway, so what does it mean? Given that the summer won't kill it, by May 13th, 4 million U.S. cases. As the healthcare system becomes saturated with cases, it will become increasingly difficult to detect, track, and contain new transmission chains. In the absence of extreme interventions like those implemented in China, this trend likely won't slow significantly until hitting at least 1% of the population, or about 3.3 million Americans. What does the caseload of this size mean for the healthcare system? That's a big question, but just 2 facts, hospital beds and masks, can gauge how COVID-19 will affect resources. The U.S. has about 2.8 hospital beds per 1,000 people. South Korea and Japan, 2 countries that have seemingly thwarted the exponential case growth trajectory, have more than 12 hospital beds per 1,000 people. Even China has 4.3 per 1,000. With a population of 330 million, this is about 1 million hospital beds. At any given time, about 68% of hospital beds are occupied with other stuff. That leaves about 300,000 beds available nationwide. And you can see where this is going pretty quickly, since we just talked about 3.3 million afflicted Americans just with coronavirus as a tenth of what they need available. The majority of people with COVID-19 can be managed at home, and that is Good news. We'll take that. But among 44,000 cases in China, about 15% required hospitalization, and 5% ended up in critical care. In Italy, the statistics so far are even more dismal. More than half of infected individuals required hospitalization, and about 10% needed treatment in the ICU. For this exercise, well, I'll tell you what. Why don't we pause, because I don't know if I can fit it all in before we actually take off for the break. We'll return to this math, but I bet some of you are doing the figures in your head and are already seeing where this is leading. If you aren't, I'll tell you what the answers are after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. All right, are you ready to really get depressed? Before I begin or resume with the Stat News, the second of our Stat News articles, I will pause just to give another figure that I guess you could consider along the way. Michael Del Moro reporting or tweeting yesterday anyway. He is the booking producer at MSNBC's Morning Joe, shown formerly with Good Morning America. Just wanted to let you know about that. But Michael Del Moro says that NBC News was reporting that the attending physician of the U.S. Congress and Supreme Court, remember that office exists where the members of Congress get free, or not free, but all-you-can-eat health care, essentially, by the attending physician's office for $500 a year or something like that, which is horrible in socialism, except they really like it and they love to make use of it, and you can't have that. Anyway, the attending physician, Dr. Brian Monahan, briefed Senate staff yesterday, and this was reported yesterday, so I imagine he briefed them on Tuesday, briefed Senate staff yesterday in a closed-door meeting, saying that he expects anywhere from 70 up to 150 million people in the United States to contract coronavirus. This, according to two sources who knew something about what went on in the meeting. And I saw this morning being tweeted around, and I didn't grab this one, but that Angela Merkel was saying, the problem with this thing, it being a novel coronavirus, is that there's no immunity out there, and she expects that something like 70% of the population of Germany could eventually contract this virus. That means different things for different people. For 80+% of the people who contract it, they'll get a cold or flu-like sort of feeling and then get better. So we believe, so far anyway. I'm not hearing a great deal about what life is like for people who have recovered from coronavirus yet. But for some percentage, it will be a disaster or even lead to their death. And even a small percentage, when you're talking about 150 million people in the United States having it, the outcomes are certainly bad. And the number of people who could die is enormous. And we've been focusing on that. And, why not focus on that? It's very scary. But what Liz Sprecht is focusing on, I think, is something even more interesting. So we'll continue with the piece here, the simple math about what is likely to happen. So again, the U.S. has about 2.8 hospital beds per 1,000 people versus in Korea and Japan, 12 per 1,000. China has 4.3 beds per 1,000. With our population, 330 million people here, That's about 1 million hospital beds across the country. That's how many we've got. And about 68% of them, I think she estimated 65% in her thread, but now she's got numbers that she links to. 68% or so occupied at any given time. And various reasons for that. One of the reasons may be, I wonder why we have so many fewer beds per 1,000 people, and I wonder whether it has anything to do with those beds are pretty expensive under our privatized healthcare system, and they do anything they can to keep you out of a hospital bed. Whereas, I guess if it's all covered, they just maintain plenty of capacity. I don't know. Anyway, so 68% of the hospital beds at any given time are occupied people with broken bones, been a car crash, cardiac arrest, stroke, the heartbreak of psoriasis, whatever it might be that drives you to the hospital. That leaves about 300,000 beds available nationwide for any more people who have heart attacks or horrible psoriasis or suffer any of the weird side effects from Covacid or whatever drug you're taking that may lead to death. Don't take if you're allergic to Covacid. You know those commercials. It's 300,000 beds out there, usually empty, for anything that might be bothering you enough to get hospitalized. The majority of people with COVID-19, as I said, can be managed at home. Among 44,000 cases in China, 15% required hospitalization, 5% in critical care. Italy's worse. Half the infected people had to go to the hospital. 10% needed to be in the ICU. So, again, for this exercise, Liz Specht is saying, I'm conservatively assuming that only 10% of cases warrant hospitalization in the U.S., in part because the U.S. population is younger than Italy's and has lower rates of smoking, which may compromise lung health and contribute to poorer prognosis than both Italy and China. Yet, the U.S. also has high rates of chronic conditions like cardiovascular disease and diabetes, which are also associated with severity of COVID-19. That'll make it real for the Fox News crowd. At a 10% hospitalization rate, all hospital beds in the U.S. will be filled by about May 10th. Then that's it. After May 10th, we got no more beds left. Doesn't matter what's wrong with you, there's no bed for you. And with many patients requiring weeks of care, turnover will slow to a crawl as beds fill with COVID-19 patients. Or they'll just stop saying COVID-19 patients need not apply. You got COVID-19, go home and die. We don't have room for you here. We're making room for the heart attack victims. She goes on to say, if I'm wrong by a factor of 2 regarding the fraction of severe cases, right? Oh, you're out of your mind. Okay. Well, that only changes the timeline of bed saturation by 6 days. That's, of course, the one doubling time that we see with the cases. Every 6 days, cases double because that's how contagious it is. So if I'm wrong by a factor of 2 regarding the fraction of severe cases, that only changes the timeline of bed saturation by 6 days in either direction. If 20% of cases require hospitalization instead of the 10 she assumed, we run out of beds by May 4th. If she's totally out of her mind and only 5% of cases require it, we can make it to about May 16th. And if she's really nuts and only 2.5% of people who get coronavirus have to go to the hospital, May 22nd. Basically, in May, it's over. We're out of capacity. But this presumes there's no uptick in demand for beds from non-COVID-19 causes, a dubious presumption. As the healthcare system becomes increasingly burdened and prescription medication shortages start to kick in, we can't get the reagents, we can't get this chemical, we can't get the supply, we can manufacture 100 bazillion pills of Covacid. Everyone remembers Covacid, right? The fake liver disease drug that they used in the movie version of The Fugitive, right? I'll use that because I don't think anybody can sue me for talking smack about Covacid. Anyway, as the healthcare system becomes increasingly burdened and prescription medication shortages kick in, people with chronic conditions, like a liver condition treated with Covacid, that are normally well managed may find themselves slipping into states of medical distress, requiring hospitalization and even intensive care. For the sake of this exercise, though, let's assume that all other causes of hospitalization remain constant. Let me now turn to masks. The U.S. has a national stockpile of 12 million N95 masks, the super good ones, besides having a full moon suit, right? N95 masks, and about 30 million surgical masks for healthcare workers, the workforce of about 18 million people working in healthcare these days. As COVID-19 cases saturate nearly every state and county, virtually all healthcare workers will be expected to wear masks, right? Good practice. If only 6 million of our 18 million healthcare workers are working on any given day, certainly an underestimate, they would burn through the national N95 stockpile in 2 days if each worker got only one mask per day, which is neither sanitary nor pragmatic. It's unlikely we'll be able to ramp up domestic production or importation of new masks, certainly not from Europe, to keep pace with this level of demand, especially since most countries will be simultaneously experiencing the same crisis and shortage. They're not going to give up any masks. Shortages, China might, they're helping people. Shortages of these two resources, beds and masks, don't, of course, stand in isolation, but compound each other's severity. Even with full personal protective equipment, healthcare workers are becoming infected while treating patients with COVID-19. As masks become a scarce resource, doctors and nurses will start dropping from the workforce for weeks at a time because they're sick, leading to profound staffing shortages that further compound the challenges, but I guess alleviate the shortage of masks to some extent. The same analysis applied to thousands of medical devices, supplies, and services, from complex equipment like ventilators or extracorporeal membrane oxygenation devices. I'm in the wrong area here. So again, the same analysis applied to thousands of medical devices, supplies, and services as applied to masks and beds. Doesn't matter what it is, right? All of this stuff, the fancy stuff, all the way down to hospital staples like saline drip bags, shows how these limitations compound one another while reducing the number of options available to clinicians. Importantly, and I cannot stress this enough, it actually says that here, even if some of the core assumptions I'm making, like the fraction of severe cases or the number of current cases, are off even by several fold, it changes the overall timeline only by days or weeks. Unwarranted panic, of course, does no one any good, but neither does ill-informed complacency. It's inappropriate to assuage the public with misleading comparisons to the seasonal flu or by assuring people that there's only a 2% fatality rate, or even for that matter, only 1%. The fraction of cases that are severe really sets COVID-19 apart from more familiar respiratory illness, compounded by the fact that it's whipping through a population without natural immune protection at lightning speed. Individuals and governments seem not to be fully grasping the magnitude and near inevitability of the national and global systemic burden we're facing. We're witnessing the abject refusal of many countries to adequately respond or to prepare. Even if the risk of death for healthy individuals is very low, it's insensible to mock decisions like canceling events, closing workplaces, or stocking up on prescription medications as panicked overreaction. These measures are the bare minimum we should be doing to try to shift the peak, to slow the rise in cases so healthcare systems are less overwhelmed. Speaking of the mocking of decisions like canceling events, I understand that the NBA's suspension of their season comes after finding out that one of the players on the Utah Jazz had tested positive. And apparently a few days ago, and I think in reaction to the prospect of suspending the season or playing games without fans present, this very same player, apparently at the post-game press conference somewhere, mocked the whole idea, and then to show how ridiculous he thought it really was, decided to lay his hands on and breathe all over and touch everybody's microphones and tape recorders and I guess it's not really tape anymore, but recording devices that people had left up on the press conference table to get audio. All the reporters put their microphones and stuff up there. He's touching them all and then goes off and everybody sort of gives a, one smile or whatever about it. But can you believe he just did that? Now that guy just tested positive like 3 days later. So everybody who was reporting on that thing just had a guy who was carrying coronavirus who was sure he wasn't mockingly touch all their equipment, and they all had to take it home. And I don't know how you disinfect your tape recorder. Anyway, back to the article. The doubling time, every 6 days, right, will naturally start to slow once a sizable fraction of the population has already been infected due to the emergence of herd immunity, that's good news, and a dwindling susceptible population, those who are mysteriously less susceptible or immune, I guess, are out there. And yes, societal measures like closing schools, implementing work-from-home policies, and canceling events may start to slow the spread before reaching infection saturation. But considering that the scenarios described earlier, overflowing hospitals, just like Italy, mask shortages, just like Italy, infected healthcare workers, just like Italy, manifest when infections reach a mere 1% of the U.S. population, these interventions can only marginally slow the rate at which our healthcare system becomes swamped. They are unlikely to prevent overload altogether, at least in the absence of exceedingly swift and austere measures. And I don't even know how this holds up versus the idea that 70% of a population could get it, not 1%. Each passing day is a missed opportunity to mitigate the wave of severe cases that we know is coming, and the lack of widespread surveillance testing is simply unacceptable. But there it is anyway. The best time to act is already in the past. The second best time is right now. So that's a bit sobering, don't you think? Okay, here's another odd thought. This time from Waldo Jaquith, who's right here in Virginia, by the way, but a software developer, but one who has done a lot of work, software development and coding development, which is the same damn thing, I guess. I don't know why I separate the two. Anyway, I've done a lot of work with local and state governments, trying to, make data transparency a priority, for instance. And he, as a result of that weird crossover, realizes this, tweeting yesterday, there's a niche problem with COVID-19 that could be an economic problem. And it's this. There are 89,000 local governments in the United States, which have hundreds of thousands of boards, commissions, and authorities. Those authorities' bylaws generally, and this is generally the case for a lot of government things, those authorities' bylaws generally require them to meet in person, which is bad for mitigating the COVID-19 spread, right? Sure, their bylaws might allow some minority of the board or whatever to sometimes participate remotely, but they're all about in-person meetings for reasons of public participation. That's normally good. To amend their bylaws to allow remote meetings, assuming the law, the statutory law, allows them, they would have to do what? They would have to meet in person in order to decide to change their bylaws to allow for remote meetings. Hopefully they're doing that already. Most of these boards, etc., meet only monthly. So they need to have a meeting before they can vote to meet remotely. And there may not be time for such a meeting. That means they may not be able to meet at all until this pandemic passes. Why does this matter? Because many of these government boards, etc., make the decisions that allow things to happen. Building permits to be awarded, RFPs to be published, vendors selected, etc. If they don't meet, those things don't happen. That money doesn't flow. A national shutdown of a great many minor legal authorities would hold back untold billions of dollars in local spending at a time when the economy will really, really need that spending, not to mention what that spending is buying, right? What's the solution to this? Probably state-level action to approve remote meetings. In some states, maybe an executive order. In others, maybe legislation is required. And others might be prepared for this. I really don't know. But every locality should figure this out as soon as possible. And yes, this included tweet, which he includes here, is absolutely right. We cannot say all these boards can meet in private because of the economy. That will go terribly. Openness and transparency must not be sacrificed. He's including here the tweet from Jack Dobbin, let's see, how does he identify himself? Democrat from Virginia, former candidate and district chair for where exactly in Virginia, I'm not sure, but Jack says the opportunity for malfeasance in relaxing these requirements is staggering, right? The idea that you could go behind closed doors or meet in secret or even remotely without opening up the remote meeting to the public, which of course, and if you've ever been on one of these conference calls, also opens up the possibility for some ridiculous mischief. Anyway, that's pretty amazing to think about, and just something that hasn't gotten a great deal of attention. But yeah, what a logistical problem that is, right? You can't even opt to come up with a solution that works for social distancing and government transparency without risking close proximity to others in mid-pandemic. You got to at least meet once to approve the idea of meeting remotely. Okay, that's pretty amazing. By the way, just happened to see flying by on Twitter here that I'm sure a lot of sports leagues, NCAA conferences are like this. The Patriot League of the Mid-Atlantic, essentially. But the Patriot League, including my own alma mater, Lafayette College, Lafayette Athletics, tweeting this out. The Patriot League Council of Presidents announced this morning its decision to cancel all spring athletic practices and competitions through the end of the 2019-2020 academic year. So that's some interesting impact all by itself, right? If you're a graduating senior looking forward to his senior season on the baseball team or what have you in the spring season, well, you're out of luck. You miss out on it. It's been suspended. And I'm sorry to tell you that that's the case, but you'd rather live, I'm sure, than even play your senior season. But how disappointing it'll be for a lot of people. What is, I don't know what it does for scholarship kids, but I guess that's up to the individual schools. And I guess assuming that the program will resume one day, they may pay your way all the way through to the end, even if you're not going to play for them anymore. But yeah, another interesting impact of all this. And graduating seniors everywhere. And I guess even graduating seniors in high school who might not be able to have the big graduation ceremony this year because it's too big of a gathering. So all that walk across the stage and reception by your family at the end, unless this is taken care of by graduation time. Think about graduations, proms, etc., not just school closing. Kids are probably happy about that. I don't know how happy they are about missing prom and baseball season, or how about kids who are looking to have a great senior sports spring season to solidify their college ride. I don't know. I guess at this point, probably if you're getting a scholarship to play college sports, that's taken care of by now, I guess, but not all of the admissions are done. But anyway, it certainly could have a pretty significant impact on that, I would think. Probably the least of our problems, but not if you're that kid, I can tell you that. All right, let's see. What else do we need to take care of here? I should probably check in on Twitter and see what sorts of commentary has been coming in. There's a few here. Let's see. Let's see. Browning who tweets to us here that I think KITM needs some Armando, although it actually says Armando without the R. And Armando is okay, but Armando, well, questionable. But yeah, it might be, I guess in the time of pandemic, we could suspend the rules for a little bit. And I guess, I don't know, do we wait until the primaries are officially done? Or is it just, I don't know. I haven't really discussed with anybody whether he's beyond rehabilitation, but we broke the rules for the impeachment stuff. Maybe global pandemic warrants that as well. Let's see. Bill then commenting on the subject here as I'd welcome hearing Greg on Tuesdays and Fridays, even if briefly with COVID updates if he's able, and I don't know whether he is or not. We implemented that old schedule because of the meeting schedule at his hospital, but of course now being retired from it, I suppose that doesn't stand in the way, but having a life might stand in the way. But certainly, Greg would be absolutely welcome on either or both of those days. And I guess anytime, we'll just say that anytime that there's important news and you actually feel like sharing it on the radio, we would obviously answer that call any day. But nice tweet. Thanks, Bill. Having a smart, level-headed medical expert on would be a good thing, and Greg's good. I think so, too. Ricky, our Ricky May from our Canuckistani, as she says. Let's see. What they'll most likely do. We're talking about how to deal with hospital bed saturation. What they'll most likely do is commandeer arenas and other large buildings to make makeshift hospitals for those suffering from COVID-19. And at that point, the problem will be finding staff to man these makeshift hospitals. That's probably a problem too. And that'll stand in the way of things. But I suppose then you'll be happy that we suspended the NCAA sporting season, right? Because then you'll get to lie around on the floor of the Superdome waiting for somebody to come and attend you. Let's see. And Kate Sherrill throwing in here, if we can't get Greg live, maybe he could record and send you short pieces. It's entirely possible, but like I said, he may have a life or whatever, and we'll see. But certainly we'll pass all of that on and see what he's interested in doing and whether any of those things will work. Let's see. What else have we got here that we can catch up on? I'm thinking maybe we try and keep it COVID-19 focused. By the way, I thought it was interesting too. I hadn't really given it any thought, and I guess none of the doctors have given it any thought to make mention of it because it's so obvious to them. But I learn these things because I don't know any of these things. But in response to the segment yesterday in which Don Lemon read Sanjay Gupta's phone, etc., and there are lots of pushback and people pushback of various kinds. But among the pro-Trump pushback, or at least I don't know whether the person was actually pro-Trump, but some of the more conservative pushback was against the idea that we really should have been more prepared for this thing, because for some reason they're like, the idea that we should have been more prepared for a virus that didn't even exist 90 days ago is ridiculous. Except, one, it's not, because general preparedness would have served in this. You don't have to have an example of that particular virus on hand in order to know how to prepare for it. That's really the point of having a pandemic preparedness program in place at all times. But then even the basic thought of, well, it didn't exist 90 days ago. And the thing is, it really did. I don't know I don't know about 90 on the dot, but I will say this. This is what I learned. COVID-19. Why is it called COVID-19? Well, the co is coronavirus. In fact, the COVID, C-O-V-I, coronavirus. But the 19, I forget what the D is, but maybe it's something fun and interesting. Oh, and I'm a little behind on the music here, too. But we'll let things run long. I think it'll be okay. Anyway, the 19 is, of course, as it turns out, 2019. What year was this virus first identified? Or this sickness first identified? COVID-19, which means that it was discovered in 2019, which means that at the minimum, it was at least very nearly 90 days ago that they actually discovered this thing, if they only found it on the last day of December. So that excuse isn't really going to cut it either. All right. I thought that was interesting. So in case you were wondering about why it was named the way it was named, now we know. And as a matter of fact, let me just call it up on Wikipedia here so that it can... Anyway, Coronavirus Disease 2019. That's all the name is. Nothing fancy. It got shortened for our purposes to COVID-19. So there's the answer. Just thought I would add that. Now it's time to stay tuned, of course, for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam coming up next. And as we started the music late, and he may allow us to continue to broadcast, unlike cutting us off for the breaks, which is pre-programmed, I can tell you a little something about what's coming up. Representative Katie Porter grilled Wells Fargo CEO Charlie Wells on whether he'd seen Harold and Kumar go to White Castle. And to refund the money, Wells Fargo overcharged consumers on auto loans.
From Daily Kos Radio
That seems
on
odd.
networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Hey, check this out. A cancer research scientist is able to link 2 U.S. state COVID-19 outbreaks with genetic fingerprints. And in an unusual move, Trump has ordered federal health officials to treat top-level coronavirus meetings as classified. Yes, we didn't even get to that one. Real crazy stuff. Stay tuned.